What's going on, guys? This is Njoku, Sneaker Principal, and welcome to this episode of the Sneaker Principal podcast. It is the evening of the 30th, and it's roughly a little after 11:36 actually, p.m. And in keeping in promise with my commitment to creating content every day from now through the last day of June 2025. This is my episode for today. So I would have loved to have recorded this much earlier in the day, but it wouldn't have been as powerful for me if I had done this episode earlier. So let me tell you a little bit about today. Today was the day that I had committed to going to Philadelphia to sit with my uncle, who's actually, I believe, I would say is my second cousin, second cousin. He's my dad's first cousin, which I believe that makes him my second cousin, Western concepts. But in African culture, he's my uncle because in all reality, he is brother to my father. So in African culture, we don't do the cousins and all that stuff. If you're from the same family, you're literally from the same bloodline. Focus over here. So he's my father's brother, even though he's my grandfather's brother's son. So I went to go see him, not to keep focusing on the concept of the relationship. But I went to go see him, and the mission, as I shared in a previous episode, was to interview him. Because I believe it's time that in my family that we start to document what hasn't really been documented prior, which is the story of the Njoku clan. And of course, this required me sitting with him and literally getting his story, getting his part of history, what he saw, what he experienced, which also allowed him to share a lot of information about my father that I didn't know before, and some new information about the family that I didn't know before, names that I had heard but wasn't sure how they were related to me, the size and breadth of the family, which I knew was big, but I didn't know how big. The mythology around the family name, which I knew was deep, but I didn't know how deep. Then the connections and the linking connective tissue between me, my siblings, and the family. And not just talking about relationships as far as who's cousins and whatever the case may be, but that thread that binds us in ways that we never quite understood. The personality types, which I'm like, whoa, it's not just me. It's not just us. It might just be all of us. Some of the secrets that was revealed to me, and out of the courtesy to my family, I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time to share with the outside world, but still information that's very necessary for my siblings and our nieces and nephews to know at the appropriate time. Those cautionary tales that every family has that is very, very important, because at the core, it helps the family be stronger. The pains, the celebrations, the momentous accomplishments, the praises that were poured upon the family decades ago by other people that are still being poured upon this generation in similar ways for very similar things that I didn't even know were connected to each other. So I know I'm speaking in code and in tongues right now, but there is so much that I learned. And I'm not going to give it away in this episode because I got to take about an hour, no, almost 2 hours of footage and sit down and dissect it and start to put it together into a narrative. And the thing about it is that I've decided that I'm going to go visit other family members. I got family in Rhode Island, and I've been in Rhode Island in a while. I think it's about three and a half hour drive. I think I'm going to make my way to Rhode Island really soon to interview another cousin, who's a first cousin of my father, who actually went to school not too far from where my father went to school. They both went to boarding schools at boys' schools that were neighboring to each other. So they spent a lot of time on the road traveling from the village to their schools. An aunt who's also a cousin who lives in Delaware. There's family in I believe in Dallas or Houston, family in Seattle. I'm asking myself, can I find a way to make this the project for 2025? Interviewing people, getting information, getting these stories, and put it into something comprehensive that can give a glimpse to who we are as Njokus from Owerri, from Imo State, from Emi Township, and also understand why we're so flung across the world. I have cousins who speak Swedish. I think those who speak Italian, those who've been all around the world. My father spoke fluent Arabic. These connective tissues to who we are. As a matter of fact, I found that my grandfather, the patriarch, the Njoku, they gave us the name Njoku, was kidnapped to be sold into slavery, and he escaped. Came back into the village announcing that he escaped. And it's funny because as the story's being told to me, I'm thinking to myself, what if he didn't escape? None of this would exist right now. His escaping allowed for us to exist. So people might say, well, yeah, you probably still exist in a different fashion. No. There's no one in the world that my mother and father would have met as who they are. The combination of genetics to allow for my existence required that he escaped from being sold into slavery, from being shipped to the new world, quote unquote. There's so much that I learned. I learned that my grandfather, my father's father, I kind of knew he was in the military, but I didn't know he was a soldier under the English flag. At that point in time, Nigeria was part of the British Commonwealth, and he was recruited to serve as an accounting clerk in the British Army during World War II. Which is interesting because when I see these soldiers, these people talk about their grandfather was part of the great generation, I can actually say that my grandfather was part of Churchill's army. Just a point of pride, of service, things that I didn't know. My uncles were engineers, those who were accountants, those who were master carpenters, those who bought their first homes and set the standard for the rest of the family. My grandfather, who was asked to be king, and said, no, I cannot be king because I have an older brother who I cannot supersede. And the community said, no, we want you. It cannot be him. And out of fierce loyalty to his brother, he said, no. And now I hear that throne, that crown has kind of been moved about the community. It's funny because I just saw Mufasa yesterday, and now I find out that my grandfather was a Mufasa. There's so much about family that we don't know because we don't ask. We don't document. We don't try to figure out like who's who, what's what. Yes, when it becomes when the stories are being passed orally, then we face some possible, discrepancies. But nonetheless, having the stories are very, very important because without those stories, you don't know who you are. What's interesting I shared with my uncle was that in 2000, no, not 2000, 1995, I was in 95, maybe 96, but 95. No, 95, 96, so the beginning of my, it would have been my junior year. I made an incredible decision that was so stressful, that gave me so much anxiety, and that was to change my major. I was in college, I was at the University of Rochester. I was a biomedical engineering student, and I did not like it. It made sense because as a West African child, growing up in a West African household, your options were very limited as far as careers were concerned. Doctor, engineer, lawyer. Then one more my father threw in is pilot. But these were the four options. And I chose because I just wanted to impress my family. I wanted to impress my father by showing how smart I am. So I was accepted to University of Rochester, New York, as a biomedical engineer major, biomedical engineering major. So I tied in the biology pre-med with the engineering. And it's like, look at me. I'm not just going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a biomedical engineer. And the fact that it mattered, none of it made sense to me. And what I mean by it didn't make sense to me, my heart wasn't in it. It was a space that I was working hard in, but it just, and I took my first film class. And the film class I took was to fulfill art credit. And before you knew it, I had more film classes than I had any other courses on my schedule. And I was like, you know what? I don't know why, but there's something about the camera and what happens in front of the camera that I have to get into. I need to understand. I need to spend my time around. I remember when I told my father I was changing my major, and he asked to what? I think I lied at the time. I said political science because I figured political science, the other option on the list was lawyer, right? But I knew it wasn't going to be political science. I knew it was going to be film and media studies. And I did that. I got that degree, not knowing how I was going to use it, because I had no need or want to go work in Hollywood or do any of those things. I did try. I did work for a PR agency. I think the gentleman's name was Michael Levine. I think that was his name, Michael Levine. That was a PR agency, and that lasted a couple of weeks. And I was like, I'm not about this life at all. And I really felt like I wasted time on that major. And so it just turned into I have an undergraduate degree, I have a bachelor's degree, and I guess that's good enough. But I didn't see the meaning within the actual what I studied, what I got the degree in. And here I am today, all these years later, a school principal. And even though the degree, my undergraduate degree, didn't quite apply into learning in school, and my master's degree in education was predicated on me having a bachelor's. It doesn't matter what the bachelor's degree was in. So I got to become a teacher, especially a special education teacher, which had nothing to do with my film degree. But now I'm a principal of a middle school in the South Bronx, and we're building out a theme around media studies and digital content creation digital communications. And the major that I had that I thought that had no meaning has brought me here. But even better yet, it's put me behind a camera in documenting my family story, which is incredible because I never thought as I watched these amazing films, I learned about, I did my film analysis, I learned about the whole process of filmmaking that, man, damn near 25 years later, I'll be sitting in a room in Philadelphia documenting the story of my family. At least the first phases, there's just a lot more interviews to happen. I really want to thank you guys who are rolling with me through this experience, who are rolling through with me through my documenting of this whole entire thing. Because this podcast is, again, an archive of my story and the story that I want to make sure that I'm able to give to my kids of who their father is. And now I get to expand that to who they are, to the story of our family. But I'm also hoping that I'm inspiring those of you who are watching this or listening to this podcast to do the same, to find ways to tell your story, to not just let somebody else dictate that narrative. And one of the most beautiful things about today was the fact that not only was I sitting in a room with my uncle, his son, my cousin, Uzochi, who I've never met before. I met him today. When I saw him, it was funny because it couldn't be helped that we're cousins. We're built the same, the beard. He has his father's face, I have my father's face, but there was something about us that was like, yeah, that's my brother right there. In blood, that is my brother. And I got to hear his perspective on the story of the family because I only spent but a total of maybe 5 years in Nigeria. My first 2 years and 3 years during my adolescence years. He was raised in Nigeria. He knows the stories and has heard the legends and everything that's been spoken about. So we got to talk and he shared things and I was like, what? And I shared things and he looked at me like, what? Because there was so much we had in common. And this is a man that I spent a couple of hours with, with his father, talking, interviewing. It's incredible what we can do and what we can learn using this medium. And that is my goal, to turn this into something amazing, something powerful, something that inspires. And there's so much more to come. So that's why I say that 2025 is going to be a very different kind of year. It's going to be a year that is unlike any other year because of what's going to come out of it, because of the intentionalities, not the hopes, not the dreams, but the work that's going to be put in. Mentally, physically, spiritually. The work that's going to be produced. Mentally, physically, spiritually. And those who will be inspired mentally, physically, and spiritually. I want to thank you all for your support. The call to action from this episode is go create something. Do something dope in 2025. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. I shared with one of my brothers this evening. I said to him, like Tywin, I think it was Tywin Lannister, who said that the lion does not concern himself with the opinion of sheep. We keep telling ourselves, I can't do that, I won't do that. What if this happens? And often our fears are tied into what we believe is going to be said or thought about us by sheep, by those people who are not willing to even try for themselves. And we give them so much power over us, so much power over us. And while we're doing that, there's dope stuff, amazing things that we could be doing, creating, putting into play that we don't do because we're so scared about what another human being, flesh and blood, is going to think. Listen, I'm done doing that. I've been done doing that a long time ago. And if you're watching this, I don't care what walk of or listening to this, I don't care what walk of life you're coming out of or what journey you're on. It's just very important that you push yourself to be amazing, fearless, and just dope. Because this life is way too short. Today I heard names of people who are alive still, but so many are gone. They're literally just whispers in the wind. And they depend on us to keep their names alive and their stories alive and together. And that will soon be us. So what is it you're going to do in the time that you have left that's going to allow for your name to not just be a whisper, to not just be a whisper, to be something more? And that's my goal. Not just for me, but for you as well. All right, y'all. This is Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. Thank you for letting me indulge and say what I had to say this evening. Be well.